Time for us to start. Good to see everybody. Brother Jason said that Brother Jim isn't feeling up to it. He thinks he pushed it just a little too hard today. For those you don't know, he had heart surgery last week, had 4 stents put into him, and but he's doing good. He is doing good. Good to see Jason and his family back. Good to see all of you. And this time I mean it. Any other announcements before we get started? Anything going on? Gary? Jason talked to him today. He's doing better. He's improving. But it's going to take some time, because that's just the way it is. So it's better than surgery if you take your time and can avoid it. So anyway, anything else? Anybody's got anything before we get started? Let's go to God in prayer. Ron?
Let us pray. Almighty Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, Lord. Thank you for this time and enough to come together, Lord. Stay with us, Lord. Father, we pray that we take these things to heart and bring them out in our lives. And Lord, we pray for all those who are not here this evening, that either are sick or not feeling well. Those who are traveling, we pray that you bring back this sick. In Christ's name we pray.
Amen. Turn in your Bibles to Acts chapter 27. Lord willing, we're going to try to complete this book tonight. Chapter 27 we kind of covered last week, but I want to go over to just a little bit more because it actually 27 and 28 should actually be one chapter. And looking at it from 27 going on to 28, it's going to make a lot more sense. The gospel per se is not preached, but it is preached because Paul is going to reiterate. He's been reiterating the last couple chapters at least 4 times why he was arrested. That he was falsely charged for causing problems with the Jewish people, with the Mosaic law, and also had to deal with breaking Roman law. But when all was said and done, no rules, no laws were broken. And he keeps repeating it, where are my accusers? And there are none. So Felix and Festus, the governors of Caesarea of Judea, they were going to go ahead and release him, but the Jewish people, the ones that initially brought up the charges, they didn't like that idea because they kept saying he's just a troublemaker. Now the governors, they've got to weigh it out, see exactly what's going on, because they're saying they want this man killed, Paul. We can't find a reason, so we're going to have to look more into it. It does not make any sense. So Felix and Festus particularly keeps Paul another 2 years in Caesarea. He had just gotten there under Felix. Festus is taking over. Paul has also spoken to King Agrippa, given his case, and they all get together and convene. And they're saying, you know what, I can't find anything wrong. Do you want to be released, Paul? Do you want to go home? He says, no, I can't. I want to appeal to Caesar. There are those that have been wanting to kill me. And unless I am under Roman protection, which is my right, I am a Roman citizen. I want to go to Rome anyway. This isn't quite the way I wanted to go to Rome. But nevertheless, I'm going to go to Rome and I'm going to speak to Caesar himself. That is my right as a Roman citizen. I'm going to prove to all I've done nothing wrong. So 27 and 28, he's on his way to Rome. He could have been released back in Jerusalem. But it didn't work out that way. God had said, you're going to go before governors and kings. And Paul even stated that, I think I'd like to go to Rome to preach the gospel. And he also states earlier he'd like to go to Spain. Supposedly, according to church history, that's not going to be for another year after Paul is released from prison or right along there. So we can see how God is working. And from 27 to 28, he is not really preaching per se, but he's preaching. I am innocent. The main reason now, I believe in the resurrection, Jesus Christ. And there's people along the way in these last 2 chapters, they're going to hear about a man they had never heard before, and how that he died for your sins, and that if you're the Christian you're to be, you'll be at home with God someday. So Paul is continuing his work. He's doing exactly what he set out to do. Many people, especially when he's going to be in Rome for 2 years, people are going to be coming and going, and he's going to be speaking to multitudes of people. He's going to write 5 epistles from Rome to the outlying churches, the churches at Ephesus, Philippi, Colossae, to Philemon. So we see the gospel is being preached and spread even though he's in jail. But he's not in jail the way that we would think. He's only being detained until they can get the information that they need. He is going to have all kinds of freedom, which a prisoner normally would not have. There's going to be a Praetorian guard occasionally, not all the time, that's going to be chained to him. It was approximately a 10-foot chain, but this chain isn't for the purpose of you're a scoundrel, you're a prisoner. It was for his safety, because since he appealed to Caesar, now it's up to the Roman government to make sure he gets to Rome safely. That's going to be on the guards that are going to take him. When he's from Jerusalem to Caesarea, it's going to be a Praetorian guard by the name of Lysias. Well, not Praetorian, but a centurion. He's going to be in charge of Paul from Jerusalem to Caesarea, and from Caesarea it's going to be a man by the name of Julius. And it'll be his turn to get him to Rome. And then from there, he's going to be under house arrest per se, but he'll still have all kinds of freedom coming and going as he wants to. So this is a very unusual case. I doubt if any of the soldiers, the ones that this is their job, had ever seen anything like this, because Paul is going to take an authoritative role in these last 2 chapters. He's just a prisoner, but at the end, well, Paul, what do you think? What should we be doing? Because he's going to prove himself over and over and over again that he's innocent and that he's a man from God. And if Paul says something, it's going to happen. God is going to speak to him along the way. He's going to warn them of what's going to happen. Listen to me. You're all going to be okay. You're going to be safe. This is going to be a rough voyage. A lot of loss is going to occur, but not one hair of your head is going to be harmed. Just listen to me. God is guiding me. An angel spoke to me and said everything's going to be fine. They don't take his word at first, but later on they're going to. Anybody have anything before we start? Look at Acts 27. These last 2 chapters here, there is so many little things. I remember when I first studied this with understanding the book of Acts, little tiny things that I just took for granted, never really thought much of, but there was a purpose. The Holy Spirit speaks, not just to hear himself speak, but for a reason. And you can catch some of this. Acts chapter 27. Paul is on his way from Caesarea to Rome. And when it was determined that we should sail, this is Luke speaking. Luke is going to be there along the way. There's going to be about 3 or 4 more, those that are going to accompany him. And one of them is going to be Timothy. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners that are named, prisoners unto a one named Julius, a centurion of the August band. So now we have a new character here. We have a Roman official, a Roman guard. This is the type of work that he does. Make sure that rules and regulations are carried out. And the present command that he's got is to make sure that Paul gets to Rome safely. Luke mentions names. He's going to mention places of geographical areas so that it could be confirmed along the way. Julius, a centurion of the Augustus band, and entering into the ship of Atraliman, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, and Aristarchus of Macedonia of Thessalonica being with us. So we see another one here that has joined the group. He's going to be going along the way. I believe it's because to be eyewitnesses, plus to be a companion with Paul. I don't think God wanted to make this journey by himself. Look at verse 3. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go into his friends to refresh himself. Evidently, he knew some people in Sidon. Brethren, friends, acquaintances, and Julius, the guard, says, you can go. He knows Paul's not going to escape. No telling what Lysias, the previous guard, told Julius about this man. You know, this man is an unusual man. He seems to want to do what's right. I find no crime that he has committed, and everything he says seems to be good. I'm going to take his word for it. But the thing is, he appealed to Caesar, so he's going to do everything in his power, Paul, to make sure that he gets there, and he's going to show his demeanor along the way, who he is, what his character is like, who this person is. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. Go ahead and go. It's fine. I trust you. That was very uncommon of the Roman soldiers to do that. Because you know what happened to Julius if Paul made an escape? Julius would die. His life would be taken from him. And the only way that he could ever have closure in himself if he took his own life. All right? But we see right here, that's how important it was, because we're going to see this later. They're going the Roman soldiers are going to want to kill these prisoners that are on the ship, because they don't want them to escape. And if they escape, it's on them. Verse 4. And when we had launched from there, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. Again, this is the worst part of the year to sail. Almost all sailing was halted. It wasn't worth it. The only way that you were going to do it was because it was an emergency. You had to. There's going to be a ship from Alexandria that's going to have a cargo of wheat. Okay, so that was an important staple. Now, if it was something else, that menial or what have you, there's no sailing, because there was no guarantee that you're going to make it, because that time of the year, it just was not great. 5. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. When you look at the map, it's all following the coasts. That's what most of your sailors did. Stayed along the coast, because along the coast the weather was not as bad. If you went too far into the Mediterranean, there was no guarantees. So you had to be very careful. So this is the rough time of the season. We're going to make sure it's safe. All right? Verse 6. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing to Italy, and he put us therein. The Roman soldiers had the authority to stop any ship, to do whatever was needed for the purpose of Rome. He sees a ship from Alexandria. I'm going to use that ship because that Alexandrian ship also belongs to the Roman Empire. And these ships, these Alexandrian ships, cargo ships, were huge. Read an article where there was up to 800 men, passengers on the ship. A lot of them were sailors, some were soldiers, some were merchants, and what have you. But we see right here, Julius found a ship that's going to Rome, so he's saying, I'm going to commandeer the ship. You got to do what you got to do, but we're coming along. Okay, that was the Roman law right there. And when we had sailed slowly, Luke mentions that right there so you can understand. We did not rush, we took our time. And we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were to come over unto Cnidus, and the wind not allowing us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone. So we see right here, they're very cautious. They want to make sure that they're doing this right. Not just the cargo, of course, but their lives. Their lives. These ships could sink at any time if the wind was that bad. In fact, the ship that they're going to be on is going to break in half. All right? But Paul says, you know what? We're going to be okay. We're going to be fine. And hardly passing it, came into a place that is called the Fair Havens, high, whereunto was the city of Lasea. So again, Luke is giving us geographical points that you could look for yourself. He was not just making up names or just a fanciful narrative. He is being very, very specific. Just in case it was called into question. Well, what happened here? What happened there? And he can give the report. Look at verse 9. And when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, see, it wasn't good to begin with, but now it's dangerous. Because the fast was now already past, Yom Kippur. All right? Paul admonished them. Why does Luke mention Yom Kippur? He's going to Rome. The Romans could care less about Jewish holidays. But what Paul is doing right here, he's proving, I'm a good Jew. I haven't broken any laws. The laws of Moses are sacred to me also. I want whoever is going to follow this itinerary here to understand I'm going to do everything I can as a Jew to prove to Caesar I'm not a troublemaker. I'm going to do whatever it takes to prove to him these are false charges brought up against me. It's not right. I'm a good Jewish man. Anybody have anything?
Honestly, maybe this was just a guess or something I heard a while back, but I was understanding him mentioning Yom Kippur or fast as this is how late into the season it is. Like we're already past the fast, and like the implication is nobody sails this late.
They don't. One scholar said, very, very few times was there ever a sail made during this time of the year. It's just like going over the mountains in a blizzard. Any of you ever been over Red Mountain? That is scary in the summertime. Can you imagine in the blizzard when you can't see? Well, we'll find out or not if we're on the highway, because we'll be down there. All right? So this was a horrible, horrible time to travel. But they almost had no choice. They had no choice. They had to get Paul to Rome. Plus there's other things that were going on that we're not privy to. I don't think it was all because of one man. It could have been. But this ship, this is a load of grain, so that part was important right there. But Julius had to make sure everything was taken care of with minimal damage. And they knew that some damage could occur. There was no way of getting around it. But what Julius is going to be doing right here, I'm going to do everything it takes to make sure this is a safe journey right here. Paul admonished them. What did he admonish them? Look at verse 10. It said to them, he's going to make a prophecy here. He's going to make a prophecy. He's going to prove who he is. They're not going to accept it at first because he's just a prisoner. Now, who's going to take the word of a prisoner? Captain of the ship? Captain of the guard? Julius? The sailors? The owner of the ship? He's just a prisoner. We got this taken care of. Don't worry about it. And said to them, sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt, not physical. Much damage, not only of the lading, what we got, and the ship, but also of our lives. We could lose our lives, but you're going to have to listen to what I tell you. This is important. So they're probably listening a little bit. Well, what does he have to say? What is it? We'll take it into consultation. We'll put it on the back burner. So they're not on board with Paul yet, but even more so pretty soon.
It's interesting to me that the way Paul says it, like he doesn't say, I have a prophecy, a
No.
message from God, this and this. He just says, hey, it's looking like this. But then later on, he's going to say, remember when I said that? Well, I get my information from God. And it's like he's just kind of laying the groundwork so that later on he can hit home who he really is and that his message is from God.
Now these Romans, and whoever the sailors were, whatever lineage they were from, they always listened to the gods, whoever they were. It's not like they're saying, well, that's Jehovah God, we don't listen to him. No, they listened to the gods. Their gods were important. When Rome took over an area, they would incorporate the different gods into the more gods, the better. The more, the merrier. So Paul is going to be speaking about God, and they're going to listen. That's how important it was. Remember Jonah? Remember what he told the sailors when instead of going to Nineveh, he went to Tarsus instead? What was it that Jonah told the sailors the reason they were having a rough time on the sea? What was that? Right, because of him. Because of him. And they said, oh, you're just superstitious. Everybody was superstitious back then. All right? Meaning they had their own gods. When the sailors realized that Jonah's telling the truth, what did they do with him? Man overboard. Except they probably didn't say that. Off he went. And what did the sea become? Calm. Calm. All right? So we see right here, Paul is making a prophecy. They're not going to listen at first. but he's going to be their best buddy pretty soon. And because the haven was not commodious, so to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, probably the captain of the ship, if by any means they might attain at Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, southern Crete, and lieth towards the southwest and northwest. So where they were thinking of going, they changed their minds. Let's go beneath, south of Crete, and these places are still there. These places that's being mentioned are still there, and I found that so amazing. Later on, we're going to read about the Appian Way. Appian was a street, one of the major streets in Italy, and when Barb and I were there, I just happened to look up, and there was a sign, a street, an avenue called the Appian Way. It's still there. So these things can be verified. Look at 13. Looks pretty good now. And when the south wind blew softly, we got us some good weather now. We're going to make good time. Blew softly, supposing they'd obtained their purpose, losing thence, they sailed close to Crete. Everything's looking good now. Everything's looking fine. It's going to work out for us. Looks like the weather is going to change. And the weather could change at any minute for any length of time. But you don't know how long. But not so long after arose against it a tempestuous wind called the Electrodon. This was a wind that would come up out of nowhere. A fierce wind. A wind that had its own name. And the greatest wind, the most tempestuous wind in the Mediterranean at that time. And it still happens. All right. So we see right here, they thought everything was going to be okay. But look what happened right here. It got worse. And when the ship was caught, it's got hold by the wind, and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. You know what that means? Let the ship go. Let it do what it's going to do. You couldn't fight it. You fight it too much, you could break up the ship. You fight it too much, you could lose your life. So they're doing the right thing. Let the ship go wherever it's going to go, and then we'll just regather later. So this is what's happening right here. Paul's prophecy is coming true. But this probably is not on the front of their minds right now. Too much is going on. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat. Everybody was put to work. Soldiers, sailors, even the prisoners. They all had a job to do. There's something that needed to be done during this particular time. They were probably warned ahead of time. You know, if there's trouble, you got a job to do. So you're going to do it. 17. And when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest that they should fall into the quicksands, strike sail, and so were driven. It's not good. It's not good at all right here. Too many things could happen. And it would be the domino effect. A little here, a little there, and before you know it, it's out of control. It's completely out of control right here. And we, being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. The ship actually should have gone down, according to the way Luke is talking, the way he's speaking right here, the words that he's using. I think God might have had something to do with it, that God was there. It's going to be a rough trip, but you're going to make it. We're seeing God right here working, and these people right here are going to see the true God. I think this is why all of this was going on. You thought it was over. You thought you were going to die. But listen to this man, Paul. He's going to guide you the right way. When God speaks, something's going to happen. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. Whatever they could get rid of, they got rid of. Lighten the ship. If it's too bogged down, it's going to cause a lot of damage. So what they couldn't use, tables, chairs, what have you, went overboard. Anybody have anything? 20. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. They say with sailors, one of the worst things is not being able to see. Couldn't see the stars. No way of navigating. They followed the stars. Now they're just at mercy of the tempest. Where are we at? We don't know. How long is this going to last? We don't know. Do you think we're going to be okay? I sure hope so. When you have this on your mind, it's hard to think rationally. But I bet Paul and his little entourage there are probably the only ones that weren't as afraid. It's something to be afraid of, but they had to remember, God's with you. God's there with you every step of the way. 21. But after a long absence, Paul stood forth. He's taken charge now. He's going to speak again. And after a long absence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, you should have hearkened unto me. Or like my mom said, I told you so. But he did it in such a way to get their attention so they can understand this is serious. If you want to make it, listen to what I got to say. Now he's starting to take, this prisoner is starting to take an authoritative role here. Sirs, you should have listened to me and have not loosed from Crete and to have gained this harm and loss. We're going to have problems here. It's not going to end up good. If you would have listened to me, we could have avoided it. But God's saying, there was a reason. There was a reason. All right? And now I exhort you, I urge you, listen to me, he says, to be of good cheer as they're being tossed back and forth. Be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but the ship. Making a prophecy. We're going to lose the ship, but we're going to be fine. You're going to get a little wet, but you're going to be alive. Don't worry about it. Look at 23. Why, Paul? Why are you saying this? Because there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve. God spoke to me. Now that's going to perk up their ears. God spoke to him? Maybe we better listen. We don't know what God it is. But if he says that God has spoken to him, we better listen. And if it doesn't come true, whatever Paul would say from then on out, I'm not going to listen to you. So Paul's neck is on the line. But the thing with God, you don't have to put your neck on the line because it's going to come true. All right? Who stood by me the night, the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. You're all going to be okay. You're going to be fine. It doesn't seem that way right now. You're going to be okay. Wherefore, sir, be of good cheer, for I believe God that it shall be even as it was told to me. If God told me, that settles it. I believe him. He's the one that's guiding me. See, Paul's being led by the Spirit also. Somebody had to reveal this to him. The angel of the Lord. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. Paul, how do you know? There's no, we don't see the stars. It's all cloudy. And you say we're going to be driven into an island? Yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Now they're starting to listen to him just a little bit more because now he's being more specific. It's one thing to say, you know what, I think we're going to be okay. But now he's saying we're going to be grounded into an island. It's going to be all right. 27. But when the 14th night was come, you think they may start to feel a little uneasy now? 2 weeks have gone by. 2 weeks have gone by. 14 days was come. As we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen, the sailors, deemed that they drew near to some country. Sailors can pretty much tell, without even looking, by the sounds of the waves, the waves are breaking. Hear the sounds of the waves breaking? We must be nearing land. Now what the fear is going to be, is it going to be ground or is it going to be rock? If it's rock, forget it. You ain't going to survive. But if it's ground, you might survive. That's how the sailors, how they thought. And they sounded and found it 20 fathoms. A fathom is approximately 6 feet. The long ropes that they had with the weight at the bottom, there was a knot every 6 feet, a fathom. And so they lowered it down. They could tell pretty much how far down the ground was, how far the bottom of the sea was right here. And they sounded and found 20 fathoms, approximately 120 feet. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms, 90 feet. So what that's telling them is, we're coming up to some kind of land. We don't know what kind. We're at the mercy of the sea. There's nothing we can do. Which way do you steer? Which way do you go? Is it going to be rocky? Is it going to be okay? We don't know. The worst thing to do is live in fear of not knowing what's going to happen to you. That's awful. That's awful. And that's exactly what's going through their minds right now. 29. Then fearing lest that we should fall in upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors. That was very unusual for a ship to have 4 anchors. That tells us right there how big the ship was. Anchors, all it simply does, you bring the weight down of the anchors, slows or hopefully catches onto something to stop you. And they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. I don't think they got much sleep that night. I don't think so. It's so boisterous, how can you? There was almost no way. And food is, well, I'd be thinking of food anyway. But that's the least thing in their minds right now. Okay? And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, look at the sailors, look what they're doing. They want to leave. It's up to you guys. Good luck. May God be with you. So the sailors knew this is not a good situation. But the sailors aren't the captain of the ship per se. It's Julius. It's his word they're going to have to take. And they let down the boat, what do they call them, the lifeguard boats? Let down the boat into the sea under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. They're acting like they're going to do something, but they want to escape. They want to escape. Well, that's not going to happen. Remember what Paul said? None of you will lose your life if you all stay together. And Paul said to the centurion, because he could see what's going on, centurion, they're ready to jump ship. Keep an eye on them. And Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved. Listen to me. This is important. We've got to stay together or we're not going to make it. There is no way. Then look what the soldiers do. Verse 32. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. Well, there goes the safety boats there.
I'm just thinking about how God is working through Paul to teach all these unbelievers. And one of the things that he's doing is he's showing them that in order for God to help you, there's certain things that you have to do. Like it's kind of teaching them the obedience principle. Like, let me just show you, if you listen to God and do what he says, it'll be well with you. So like even before he gets to the plan of salvation or anything like that, they already understand this principle that okay, if we do what God says, it's going to work.
He's got their attention. So if he's correct about this, what else is he correct about? Paul is guiding them by the power of God, and they're slowly starting to see it. You know, sometimes it takes a while for us to understand, doesn't it? Sometimes some things are not over. Nathaniel, simply, Jesus had to say, you know, he was under a tree, and he believed. But then look at Thomas. See, I identify with Thomas, because that's just me. But the point being, they're going to see that God is with this man right here. And they're going to start to listen to him more and more. Well, Julius, do what he says. Do what he says. See, he's taking a chance too. But he saw something special in Paul. Pharaoh saw something special in Joseph. Potiphar saw something special in Joseph. The jailer saw something special. You know, everything this kid touches turns to gold. Pharaoh was not stupid. He saw something in Joseph and says, you know what? I bet this boy, well, he's about 30 years old now, I can take a day off. I can go do some fun stuff because I trust this guy. There's something in him. And the jailer made him the jailer. Potiphar gave him the whole house to run. So there's a certain personality that you have seen yourselves. You know, that's a good person. That's a good lady. They mean good, and I trust them. So Julius is saying, do it. Cut off those ropes right there. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat. Listen, guys, we've eaten a little, but we haven't sat down and had a nice big meal. There's been no time, and really this isn't the place either. We're worried about our lives. Paul says, now listen, you got to eat. You would never have to tell me that. All right? The day is the 14th day that we have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. All right? One scholar, well, there's a couple of scholars says it did not mean that they did not eat altogether. That wasn't their main concern. Not at all. 34. Wherefore I beg you to take some meat, for this is for your health, and there shall not a hair fall from your head, any of you. Listen to me. Now, how far would you go to warn somebody that you cared about? You would do everything in your power. And that's exactly what he's doing right here. He's giving them warning after warning. Listen to me. Listen to what I got to tell you. It's going to work out. And when he had thus spoken, they took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. What is Paul doing? He's praying, and they could see him. He is thanking God for what? For being with them. He's thanking God that nobody has lost their life. They see him, they hear him. Now, what language they were speaking, I don't know. Whether it be Latin, Aramaic, Greek, don't know. But the point was, they know what Paul's doing. He's praying to his God. In presence of them all, and when they had broken bread, he began to eat, and they were all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. They waited for Paul to take the first bite. And they saw that Paul, he seems to be in a pretty good mood. Well, that kind of wears off unto others. And we were in all the ship 276 souls, 276 were on this boat altogether. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship again. All right. The weather's starting to take a turn for the worst. Whatever we do not need whatsoever, get rid of it. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek or a bay with a shore into which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust the ship in. These sailors knew of this island, but the direction they were coming from, it wasn't familiar. It's like going home, taking the back road. The ship, that's what it had done, taken them the back way to this island right here. Otherwise, they would have recognized it. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves into the sea and loosened the rudder bands and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind and made toward shore. They're doing everything possible to make sure that they have a safe embankment here. And falling into a place where the two seas, they ran the ship aground. This was on purpose. And the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. The front part was okay, it was steadfast, but the rear was sticking up in the air and it broke. So everybody's crowded at the front, trying to take care of themselves. Look at verse 42. And the soldiers got together and were going to kill the prisoners, lest any of them would swim out and escape. See, Luke doesn't go into detail, how are you going to kill the soldiers? Well, they're going to escape. Well, because if they escape, it's your life. See, that was something commonly known back then. But we see right here, the soldiers say, you know what, even though Paul has said this and that and it's all worked out, we're still scared that we could lose our lives. But Paul's going to intervene right here. Look at verse 43. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose. We see right here Julius doing the will of God. No, Julius, don't do that. Do what Paul says. Do what he says here. Commanded that they should swim, cast themselves first into the sea, and get to land. Each man for himself. Where are they going to run to? Where are they going to go? They're all going to stay together. They don't know where they're at. They don't know if this is friendly people, if there's horrible beasts or what have you. They have no idea. So they got to stay together. And the rest, some on boards and some broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to the land. Isn't that amazing? You mean that came true, the prophecy from God? That they were going to be okay, not a hair was going to be lost? Now that has to sink in their minds. The soldiers, the sailors, and the other prisoners. You know what? Maybe there is something special about this guy. I don't quite have him figured out, but I think I just might listen more to what's going on. But now we're going to see Paul work. We're going to see him do things they had never seen before. And that's going to sort of be the icing on the cake. They're going to see this man work by the power of God. So more people, because they're going to be here for 3 months. They're going to be there for 3 months. And you think Paul's going to keep quiet, not say anything about God? He's got a captive audience. Where are they going to go? All right? And plus, he's going to do some things they had never seen. Chapter 28. And when they were escaped, when they were fine, that they knew that the island was called Melita or Malta. Island is still there to this day. And the barbarous people, everybody have barbarous? Natives. You know what barbarous means? I used to think uncouth, uncivilized. No, just a different people. They weren't Greeks. They weren't Latin. They were just different people. So that's how the Greeks and the Romans identified others. Barbarians. But to us, it's a connotation of being like cavemen. All right? And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. It had to be cold. Our daughters, when they were in Tennessee, they used to love to play in the rain. Remember doing that when you were a kid? Playing in the rain? And then when we moved to Colorado, it was raining outside, and they wanted to go outside and play in the rain. And I said, thinking to myself, okay, go ahead and try that. They were outside for about maybe 30 seconds. It's cold. See, I knew it was, but you wouldn't have believed me. I'm just Dad. What do I know? All right? But we see right here, they're cold from the sea. They're cold from the rain. They're cold from the wind. They're cold. So what do these people do? They make a fire for them. See, these aren't barbarians. These are kind-hearted people that have brought in Paul and this group safely. Now, Paul's going to do the same for them pretty soon. He's going to show them kindness. If they were barbarous people in the negative sense, I don't know what Paul would have done, but Paul's going to show them the power of God. All right? And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. Does everybody have fastened? You know what that means? It means the snake had a good grip on him. Had both fangs on him. That means to them, there's poison now in Paul's body. It wasn't sort of like a brush off or what have you. No, the snake clamped onto him for a reason. Okay? Turn, if you will, to Mark, the last chapter. 16. This is Jesus before he goes into heaven. Look at this now. Look at verse 17. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. Paul's already done that. They shall speak with new tongues. One scholar said that they're probably speaking in a tongue that's not Latin, Greek, or Aramaic, but Paul is speaking to them. So it's possible speaking in a different language right here. And they shall take up serpents, not intentionally, but we just saw this example, didn't we? And if they drink any deadly thing, according to history, Christian history, the apostolic fathers said that John, the apostle, was forced to drink poison by Caesar Domitian. Going to kill him. Domitian hated Christians. Well, that didn't work. So they threw him in a cauldron of boiling oil. And guess what John did? Got out. Didn't bother him. So if that be true, we've seen this example so far. And shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. Paul is going to do almost every one of these on this island. They're going to see the power of God. They've never seen that before. They are superstitious people. They've got their own gods, but they're going to see the true God. Go back to chapter 28 in Acts.
Also, just one thing that stands out to me is that the way Luke in the Bible talks about these people is that it humanizes them, as opposed to barbarians that are half the men that we civilized people are. But the Bible so often does that, like with women, the respect that the Gospels give to women, here. I just think that's important.
Of all the churches that's recorded in the New Testament, there was one group that you could pretty much call barbarians. That was the Galatians. They were a wild, wild group. Okay? But this is not them. This is not them. 5, and he shook off the beast into the fire, and he felt no harm. Bob said she would have fainted just right there, looking at a snake. But that snake fastened onto him, shakes it off into the fire, and kept doing his business. Howbeit they looked, these people here, that he should have swollen or thrown down dead suddenly, but after they had looked a great while, they're waiting for him to die. It's kind of an awkward moment, wouldn't you say? What are you waiting for? I'm waiting for you to die. Why? You just got bit by a poisonous snake. Oh, by the way, there's no more of those poisonous snakes anymore at Malta. They've gotten rid of them since then. Had fallen down dead suddenly, but after they looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their mind. They're kind of fickle. He's a God. He's a God. Remember back in Acts chapter 14, Paul's first missionary journey, when Paul healed a man that was crippled, what was it, in Derbe? Right around there, and they wanted to offer sacrifice to Paul, calling him Jupiter and Barnabas, Mercury, and all that. And Paul says, "No, don't do that. We're not." Well, they think he's a god, but he's going to show them the true God. And in the same quarters were possessions of the chief man. This is the captain of the island, if you want, or the sheriff. Were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. Word probably got to him that these people should have all died in the sea. But they survived. They've probably seen that before. They shouldn't have made it. But that one Paul got bit by a poisonous snake, nothing happened to him. So we see Publius, maybe he's interested in this. Maybe he wants to know a little bit more. Look at verse 8. Look at verse 8. Just a coincidence here. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever of the bloody flux, dysentery, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. So it just happened that Publius' father got sick. Think it was a coincidence? I don't think so. So what's Paul going to do? He's going to pray over him, and he's going to lay his hands on. That's important. Say Publius' father, Paul's standing there. Before he does anything, the man sits up. "Oh, I feel better now." They wouldn't have thought nothing of it. Paul had nothing to do with that. But Paul lays his hands on him, prays over him. They see what he is doing, and he recovers. So just that laying on of the hands was a visual for them. 9. So when this was done, others also which had diseases in the island came and were healed. Word got out. Now, if you had some relative that had something wrong with them, and there was a man by the name of Paul, what would you do? Remember back in Jerusalem when Peter, just a few days after Pentecost, healed a man that was lame, and then everybody started bringing neighbors and friends that had something wrong with them. Same thing's happening right here. God is showing his power to these people right here, showing them who the true God is. And so when this was done, others also, which had diseases in the island, came and were healed. They were healed. Who also honored us with many honors, and we were departed. They laid us with such things as were necessary. They're grateful. They welcomed these seafaring people here, these sailors, with open arms. They didn't have to. Did what they could to make them comfortable. Paul is showing them back the same courtesy, but then some, by healing the sick right here. What's greater, showing them who God was or healing the sick? See, this is what Paul was doing right here. And after 3 months, I wonder what Paul preached for the 3 months there. I wonder if there was a congregation left behind there. Wouldn't doubt it.
I did notice that Publius is known as a saint in Catholic tradition. So people certainly think he became something.
But they should have made God out of, well, they sort of did make a God out of Paul. But I'm sure he straightened them out. All right? So for 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the island, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. Anybody know who Castor and Pollux are? Anybody remember their Greek or their Roman mythology? They were the sons of Zeus. They were sailors, and they took care of those that had trouble at sea. Isn't that something? See, this is going to get back to Rome. They're going to hear about the things Paul did. They're going to hear the things, the miracles and what have you, and they're also going to hear of their own gods. So if they didn't know anything about the God of Paul, they're going to say, well, this group here was under the guidance of our gods. How wonderful that was. Okay? And the landing at Syracuse, it's still on the way, we tarried 3 days. And from then we fetched a compass. We went around and came to Religium, and after 1 day south the wind blew, and we came next to Puteoli, where we found brethren. There's a church there, southern Italy. And we found brethren who desired us to stay with them 7 days, and so we went towards Rome. So we see right here they stayed how many days? How many days did they stay at Troas, Paul and Luke? 7 days. Some scholars believe they were there with the brethren to also partake of the Lord's Supper. It doesn't say that, but if it was for 7 days, I bet that's what happened. I bet that's what happened there. 15. And from there, when the brethren heard of us, they came down to meet us as far as Appia, Forum, and the 3 taverns, it's a vicinity, where Paul saw, and he thanked God and took courage. We're almost there. We're about 35 miles from Rome. So the group, the brethren that found them initially, we have a group coming from Rome coming down to receive them. All right. And when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, and Paul suffered. Paul was allowed to dwell by himself with the soldier that kept him. Another privilege that Paul received because of what he did. Now he's turned over to a new guard, a new one. This will be the 3rd one. I'm sure Lysias informed Julius of Paul initially. Now Julius is going to inform this new guard. You ought to see the things that happened along the way. You wouldn't believe it. We should be dead now. But this man saved our lives. Treat him good. Treat him good. He didn't have to do that. But he let us know what was happening along the way. We didn't believe really at first, but we believe now. And Julius is probably saying, take care of the man as much as you can. Okay? 17. And it came to pass after 3 days, Paul called the chief of the Jews together. There's 7 synagogues in Rome at this time. 7 synagogues. So he's going to call for the leaders of the synagogue. I need to talk to you. When they were come together, he said unto them, Men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or the customs, the law, yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. This is about the 5th time he's telling the story. But now he's telling it to the Jewish brethren. These aren't Christians. He wants to make sure that he gets his message out, why he's here. And he also wants to know, have you heard anything that happened about me in Jerusalem or Caesarea? They hadn't heard a thing. But now Paul is going to give his side of the story. Usually, when a person approaches you and tells you their story, you're going to weigh every other story. You're going to use that as your guideline. All right? You're more likely to believe the first person. And all others are going to be judged by, what was he saying? Was it true? Committed nothing against the people or the customs, our fathers. Yet I was delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans, who, when they had examined me, they talked to me, would have let me go because there was no cause of death in me. But when the Jews spoke against it, I was constrained. I had no choice but to appeal to Caesar. Not that I have anything against my people. Festus kept Paul longer than he should have. He wanted to put his best foot forward for the Jews. And why? Because if he would have probably let Paul go, there would have been a big uproar, and Festus would have a big problem on his hands, and it wouldn't look good. So rather than letting Paul go, he keeps him to keep the peace. 20. For this cause, therefore, I have called you to see you, to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel, what's the hope of Israel? The Messiah, the resurrection, that I am bound with this chain. And they said unto him, we've never received letters out of Judea concerning you, neither any of the brethren that came showed us or spake any harm of you. We haven't heard a word. Thank you for telling us, giving us a heads up right here. But we desire to hear of what you think. For as concerning this sect, this group, sect means heresies to them, we know that everywhere it is spoken against these Christians. Nowhere can you go in Rome and hear something positive about them. They're just a bunch of troublemakers. And when they had appointed him a day, we're going to pick a day out, Paul. We're going to come back together. We want to listen to you. They came to him at his lodging, to whom he espoused and testified the kingdom of God, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses and of the prophets, from morning till evening. Paul is speaking to them why he's there. Not necessarily why he's arrested. He's preaching to them the gospel, the kingdom. Now, some people believe the kingdom is still centuries from now. Kingdom hasn't been established. It has. What good would it have been to them 2,000 years ago to preach a kingdom where everything's going to be fine over 2,000 years from now? You're not going to say, oh, I feel better about that now. They're in the kingdom right here. They're in the kingdom. 24. And some believed the things that were spoken, and some didn't believe. Well, that's everywhere Paul went. All right. And when they agreed not among themselves, their argument now is with Paul. Some believe, some don't believe. Okay. They departed, and from that, after Paul had spoken one word, well spoke the Holy Ghost by Isaiah the prophet unto the fathers, saying, go unto this people and say, hearing you shall hear, but you shall not understand, and seeing you shall see and not perceive. For the heart of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have they closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Remember what Jesus told the Jews there in John chapter 9? Remember when he healed the blind man? Jesus is talking about being able to see. This man was blind, now he can see. And the Jews that are standing there saying, are you saying that we're blind too? Paul says, yeah, you're blind. You don't accept what I have to preach. Paul is saying the very same thing right here. Be it known therefore unto you that the salvation of God is sent unto the Gentiles, and they will hear it. If you don't want to hear it, I'm going to go to some people that will listen to me. I just had a group back there. They listened to me. Some of you are not willing to do that. And when he had said these things, the Jews departed and had great reasoning among themselves. They're going to debate this for a while. And Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own hired house and received all that came unto him, preaching the kingdom of God and teaching those things which concerned the Lord Jesus Christ with all confidence, on no man forbidding him. He was able to do pretty much what he wanted. He's going to write 4 books, maybe 5 books, while he's there in his own hired house. More people are going to be coming, going than he ever thought possible. He's going to get more accomplished in those 2 years than all the time put together. That was God's plan. Paul didn't know it. He just thought he was going to go to Rome and speak to the church or what have you. No, he's got a greater audience right here. Anybody have anything before we close here?
There's such a great insight into how when we go out and teach that we are to spread the seed. It's not to stand until somebody plants and grows. It is our job, and we need to remember that some choose to have their eyes closed. And when he puts that in there, he's telling us disbelief is for some. For those who choose to not believe, it is a choice. And it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve and understanding that God wants us to choose him and how important that is. But then we have to allow for those to just not choose him. And that is not a personal attack on us, so that we must continue the work going forward for those people who do have eyes that will open and hearts that are open and receive it. And it's such a great insight and a reminder to us, because how hard it must have been for Paul. He taught so many burdens, but he continues forward, even knowing how hard it was, or how stubborn he was.
You have to also remember, Paul is preaching to some of his audience that know nothing about Jehovah. Nothing. Superstitious people. And the other side, they've been engrounded in the Jewish faith for over 1,000 years. Think of how hard that is to break away from that. But it only took Paul 3 days. Exactly. So now next Wednesday night, what we're going to do, it's still connected. We're going to see what Paul did for those 2 years. The people that did come and go. And we're going to look at a little bit of some of the books that he had written, some of the epistles. So we're going to see for those 2 years, he was busy. He was a busy man. He wasn't just there and says, you know what, I'll just wait for them to send me that letter. Caesar will hear you now. No, it wasn't that way at all. So we'll see more of these things. Jason, can you pick out a closing song? And then we have Brother Harold to do our closing prayer.
Number 477. 477, and we'll stand if we can as we sing this song. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed sent from the heart of God, hold us to wait before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of comfort sweet, near to the heart of God, a place where we our Savior meet, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us to wait before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release, near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace, near to the heart of God. O Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us to wait before thee, near to the heart of God. I wanted to ask prayers for one of our people who work at our assisted living, Harold. Her name is Laura, just like our Laura. She lost her niece today, 27 years old, suddenly, and she's pretty devastated. And her sister, the mother of the niece, is disabled, and she's not even sure how she's going to tell her that her daughter passed. So appreciate prayers for her. Again, her name is Laura.
Let us pray. Our God and our Father, hallowed be thy name. We're so thankful, Lord, for this day and the many blessings you give us. Thank you for this meeting and thankful for Ashley's lesson on the book of Acts and the Apostle Paul and the things that he went through. We're thankful that you've given him to us, given us the gospel, your word. Thank you for it. Thank you for all that you do for us. We pray for Gary and pray for his continued healing, that you be able to be back to normal and be able to go on with his life. We ask also for Laura, who's lost her niece, and pray for her and give her comfort and watch over her and help Jason and those around her to help her to deal with this problem that she has. We're thankful for each other and thankful for the many blessings you give us. Thank you for this lesson this evening. Let us take it to our hearts and understand what Paul went through and realize how easy we have it here at this time. I pray for the leaders of this land that will be able to go on, and the new leaders that will be able to go on and correct many mistakes that were made before them. That we could live in peace and not worry about being arrested somewhere or just praying to God. I'm thankful that we're not under that curse, and we pray for those that are. Guide and watch over us and give us safe journey home. Thank you for Jason and Laura and their family and the ability to have a safe ride, a safe way home, and be back here with us. Go with us now and forgive us where we fail you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.